We take our seats. Well, welcome back from lunch. We are in the top of the 8th inning, and the score is tied, so no one wants to leave their seat, I'll tell you, for what we've got for the rest of the afternoon. But we're particularly excited about this particular panel and this discussion. In the past, while most of our conference is focused on analytics from a baseball operations perspective, and that's what gets a lot of play in the media, we also want to bring to you what's going on the analytics side, on the business side of the sport. And sometimes a lot of what goes on the business side of the sport transcends any individual sport and is really applicable across sports. In fact, you'll see some of that today, although most of the examples you'll see in the discussion will be grounded in baseball. You'll also see some examples from outside of baseball. But we're delighted to really talk about the revenue drivers, which of course link very closely to the baseball ops side, because these are the guys who generate the money to pay for the players, right, and give the GM their budgets. So it is really all connected. And today our moderator is someone we're very fortunate to have back. He's been a very integral part of the SABR Analytics Conference from its very beginning. His name is Dan Migala, and Dan is a former executive with the San Diego Padres. He has formerly run the graduate sports management program at Northwestern. He's the founder of Property Consulting Group, which is a marketing and sponsorship firm in the sports space. And he's also the owner of a minor league baseball team. And if people know anything about marketing, you really realize what goes on at the minor league level in baseball. It's a critical element of the whole business there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Welcome.
All right, so top of the 8th, does that make me, I can earn a hold here? Okay, I like it. So thanks, Vince, for the introduction. You know, it's great to be here. Before we start on the content here, as Vince mentioned in the open, I was proud to be part of the team that actually helped launch this conference 4 years ago, and I wanted to just take a moment. I think really at the heart of this event is Mark Appelman and Vince Gennaro. Let's give them a round of applause. You know, it's amazing to see how fast the baseball community, the Major League Baseball community, has really welcomed this event, and I feel almost like a grandfather up here of 4 years into the making. And I think for the students that are here, it's been rewarding for me, I think, to see former students now attending the conference with a golf shirt with a team logo on it, and that's really kind of the proud moment, I think, for all of us with the content. So kudos there. I wanted to get that acknowledgement in. As Vince mentioned, and we've got two great panelists in this session, so much of the content for this event, right, is around how teams spend money. And you can't spend money that you don't have, right? The use of analytics from a creative standpoint of how you evaluate talent, how you find underperforming assets, and really maximize the forecast for every payroll dollar you have. There's a mirror effect that's happening on the other side of the hallway that I spend most of my time helping front offices of teams and leagues in a variety of sports, in how you use analytics to make money. And Vince was right. I think minor league baseball is a great case study in the creativity of how you generate revenue. These guys from Major League Baseball level, what they're using from an analytics standpoint is just tremendous, and I think we've only scratched the surface. The key focus that we're going to really spend some time on today, the key revenue generators, right? If you're sitting across from a GM, where you can make the most money for a team, tickets and sponsorship. And we're really going to kind of take a deeper lens into how the Diamondbacks, the Padres are really generating incremental revenue, new revenue streams, and maximizing our revenue capabilities, right, from the standpoint of how you use data and analytics for it. Myself, I'm going to actually share some non-baseball case studies. I thought it would be interesting for you to see how teams in the SEC, in college football, as an example, are utilizing data and analytics to create new ticket offerings, how NFL teams are creating new sponsorship offerings and monetizing their fan bases in different ways. So, with that, what we want to do for this session is really outline, each of these guys are going to get up for about 10, 15 minutes, showcase some of the case studies that they're doing, give you some insights. I'll anchor it with a look into some of those non-baseball examples, and then we'll really open up for a Q&A, and we'll carry it over to the bottom of the eighth. And I'll earn my hold, right? Which I'll look forward to seeing that on my baseball reference account, later. But our first panelist, and we couldn't have had a better, first start to this, is Ryan Gustafson from the San Diego Padres. Ryan carries one of these titles that, 4 or 5 years ago you really wouldn't have seen, but he's the Senior Director of Business Strategy and Innovation for the San Diego Padres. Listen to his roles and responsibilities: business analytics, strategic planning, financial projections, and special projects. He's actually has an MBA from Harvard Business School, and he also spent some time in the commissioner's office. So a great guy for us to learn from and get some exposure to what we're doing from the Padres. I'll have him come up, and then we'll introduce Kenny Farrell, his counterpart from the Arizona Diamondbacks. So let's please invite Ryan up here to walk us through the first set of slides.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate the introduction. It's great to be here. It's kind of funny. I actually attended the conference as a student a few years back, so I was one of the people that was in your shoes, and it's kind of awe-inspiring to be up here. So I appreciate all your time. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Padres are using analytics on the business side. As it's been mentioned before, we're kind of the other shoe for the baseball side. Anytime baseball wants more money to spend on payroll, like they have with us this off season, obviously. I'm kind of the guy that gets to take the responsibility of helping drive the revenue and project the revenue to match up with the payroll that has been increasing, it seems, every day for us. So I'm going to talk about, I've been with the Padres about 2 years now. I'm going to talk about 3 different projects that have been really great from an analytics perspective within the last few months. Particularly in the last 6 months, as a lot of change has been happening with us. I think with any analytics project, I always try to think about what the business problem is that we're trying to solve. So what are the issues that we can try to use analytics to help create and use for smarter business decisions. The second piece, I always look at, okay, what's the data that we do have available to us to make these decisions? And then lastly, how do we communicate these findings? And I think that's really the most important piece of anything that we do from a business analysis perspective. I think it's probably 20% identifying problems, 20% doing the analysis, and really 60% of it is how do I communicate to ownership, how to communicate to senior executives exactly what the data is saying to hopefully make smarter business decisions. So I'm going to talk about 3 different use cases today. First is our attendance and revenue projections. I'll talk a little bit about ticket pricing, and then the recent ballpark renovation project at Petco. Attendance projections is probably the most basic but important thing that we do from an analysis perspective, especially with everything that's been happening with the Padres this offseason, new demand, new fans, kind of taking what we thought our business was going to be back in October and completely changing it. So how do we understand what these new baseball moves are going to drive from a revenue perspective to help us pay for these additional players, but again, also just help us understand and make smarter business decisions? We use a variety of methods to really project out revenue, from everything from single game tickets to season tickets to group tickets and the like, and then everything from a game day revenue perspective, how that translates into concessions revenue, how it translates into parking revenue, and anything and everything in Petco Park on game day. This report is, or this analysis changes on a daily basis for us. It automatically updates, and then senior executives look at our attendance and revenue projections on a daily basis and really try to understand how to make better decisions from it. I listed a few of the ways that our attendance and revenue projections help us make smarter business decisions. But budgeting, everything from in November when we're projecting out the next year, this is what we use to help understand how much money we're going to have for payroll. Ticket pricing, which I'll talk a lot more about in detail, but how are games and sections pacing relative to our expectations, and where are our opportunities to increase ticket prices, and where should we be decreasing ticket prices to help drive revenue. Inventory management, this has been a huge one for us this off-season with all the new demand that we're having. But where do we strategically, how do we sell our ballpark? Do we sell it as a season ticket? Do we sell it as a single game ticket? Where do we put our big groups? Where do we put people that want premium seating? So inventory management is a big thing that we use this for. Ballpark operations and concession staffing. Obviously knowing how many people are in the ballparks can help you staff better. How many security guards, how many ticket takers and ushers and whatnot, and really optimize the cost side of the business as well. And then marketing allocation and promotional calendar, which I think Kenny's going to talk quite a bit about, but how do we understand our business and how to optimize our marketing resources so we can spend more on player payroll. This is a visual that might be tough to see, but it's essentially outlines what our ticket model looks like. This is for the more stats heavy people in the room. I'll fly through it quickly because I'm not one of those. But this is a model that essentially predicts our single game ticket, which is really the most statistically driven part of our attendance model. It uses a Bayesian mindset in the way that it uses multiple regressions to predict ultimately how many people are going to buy single game tickets for a given game. So it starts and it predicts how many people are going to buy tickets when we first go on sale based on opponent. Are we playing the Dodgers on a Saturday in July? How many tickets are we going to expect to sell in the first week? And then that becomes an input into the next piece of the model, which is how many people are going to buy from the first week to a month before the game, which becomes an input into the next model, and so on and so forth, all the way down to how many people are going to buy when they walk up on the day of the game. So these 6 models essentially feed into one another and ultimately get to a place where we understand that on a Dodgers Saturday in July, when our team is 500 and James Shields is pitching, we're going to expect to have 17,000 people buy single game tickets. So it's really the most statistically driven part of what we do, but single game tickets is also probably the most volatile revenue stream on the ticketing side, so it helps us really understand what we're projecting from a revenue perspective to make a lot of these tough business decisions. Ticket pricing, this is a huge one on the revenue side, obviously. How do we price our stadium more efficiently to drive revenue? So that's from, pricing high demand games, high demand sections, and also low demand games and low demand sections. How do we more efficiently price tickets to drive primary market revenue? And really this last offseason we went through a complete change of our ticket system, which previously to this year we only had 36 prices in the stadium that we could use, and now we can essentially price every seat in the ballpark differently for every game if we really wanted to. We would never do that because people would go crazy, but that's the kind of ability that we have now. So this last offseason we went through a lot of analysis on how do we efficiently price our stadium. Everything from utilization rates across games, across sections, secondary market prices. We have a great data set from our partnership with StubHub and understanding relative demand across games and sections. So how do people demand a Saturday game in July against the Dodgers versus a Monday game in April against the Diamondbacks? So that's really, and how do people value row 1 versus row 20 of a specific section? How does that change across different game types? So really, this analysis allows us to look at a really big picture of 42,000 plus seats and really boil down what the true value is of each ticket and how we can maximize ticket revenue. So the result of this was really how do we reprice Petco Park with this new power, and I'll show you a few graphs that I think will be helpful. This is a utilization map, and again, it's kind of hard to tell because it's a little bit small, but really what you can see is a lot of the inefficiencies that I'm talking about, like this area right here, the ballpark, this area right here, down in here, areas that are red with green next to it. Red is bad, green is good. And so you can see where these price breaks were. People were buying here but not buying here because it was a more expensive ticket. So we weren't really able to maximize revenue by putting people in the best seats and driving the most revenue and yield on each seat. So these utilization inequities would really help not letting us optimize overall revenue. this is what the pricing looked like. So you can see where these hard breaks were, and you know, we weren't able to price any smarter than this because of the system. And so how you can see how these breaks, you know, kind of led to that utilization map. And then what we did this year is this. So much smoother transition from one section to another, different prices in different rows, so we can shift buyer behavior into home plate, have people buy more expensive tickets, but then also, again, capture upside from our most highly demanded seats. Stadium renovations. This is by far the coolest project that I've worked on in the last 6 months. From our ownership group on down, they wanted us to look at how we renovate Petco Park to kind of keep up with the change in demand. You know, Petco was designed in, you know, the late 90s, and, you know, in the last 15 plus years, the way that people consume entertainment, the way they buy tickets, and the way they watch baseball is completely different. So how do we keep up with the changing, evolving marketplace and kind of renovate Petco as opposed to having 42,000 fixed general seats in the stadium? How do we make it to have new experiences that are fun for fans and also drive additional revenue from us? So our business problem is here again is like, if you could redesign Petco Park today, how would you do it? And we spent like 6 months diving into every single row of the ballpark, every single space of the ballpark, understanding utilization, overall revenue by row. What would happen if we cut out this section entirely? What would happen if we were able to price it higher because we created a new product or added beer to a certain area of the stadium or whatever it is? And so then we looked at also our product line. You know, where are our holes in our product? Do we have like a $25 gap in the ticket pricing offerings where people are getting downsold? Do we have, sponsorship? Do we have certain assets that companies are valuing in the stadium? So what is selling best, and how do we create more of that? And what isn't selling, and how do we convert that into revenue driving opportunities? So we just recently completed a 5-year plan at Petco Park. I can't talk too much about the future, but left field was a huge source of what we did this off season, which I'll talk a little bit about. Before, on the left, is what it was like last year. This is a mock-up of what it's going to look like this year. Obviously, the big board was a huge piece of it, but it was kind of an impetus to look at the entire area of the ballpark. I'll point out a few areas. Right here, this is the back of our upper left field. Was selling for like $3 per seat per game. We were selling it at like 20%, only in high demand games, and it was just an eyesore because no one ever sat there. This area right here, the left field cantilever, was selling really high at a high value, but was underutilized from a space perspective because we had all this empty space right here. So how do we use this and create a new product that people are going to actually enjoy and kind of like has this higher value to it? And because this was hanging down, the left field lower section right here wasn't selling at all because it was like underneath like almost like a cave type feeling. So really, how do we take this whole entire analysis and figure out a new way of looking at left field? So what we did was we cut out about 600 seats back here and put in this new group area. Group areas have been a growing piece of business for us. They sell through at 90+%. They're a 12% plus year growth business. When people don't want to have 300 seats and sit next to the same person for 9 innings, they want to interact and mingle. So how do we create new products that are like that? So we created this 500-person group space in the back of left field underneath our big board. We converted all these general seats in here to like our new green monster. So it'll be a bar stool. You'll get free beer included in your ticket price, and it's just like the newest, coolest experience at Petco Park. And then lastly, we shifted out left field by removing 2 rows back there and adding 2 rows in the front. And we did move the fences in, but it wasn't for baseball reasons, it was for business reasons, I promise. So it had nothing to do with Matt Kemp or Justin Upton or Will Myers. All serious note, we had this made up way before we signed any of those and traded for any of those guys. So, but what we did is we removed a couple rows back here, shifted left field out. So now this area in the back of this section is no longer going to be underneath this cave, and hopefully, again, we'll sell higher amounts of tickets and also higher prices there. So that's the coolest thing that I've done in the last 6 months, near and dear to my heart. So I wanted to share that with you, and hopefully you'll come out and get a chance to see it live sooner than later. Here's another visual of it. So what's next for us? I'll talk very briefly about this. Internal dynamic ticket pricing model. We want to be able to automatically update ticket prices as we go along to update with demand, really understand cross-price elasticity. How does the price in one section affect the price in another section? Concessions analysis, huge opportunity for us. How do we know how many hot dogs we're going to sell on Saturday and how we can use that information to optimize our concessions business? Maybe we introduce variable pricing of concessions, maybe not, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of opportunity there. Refining our lead and retention scoring models. We model out each and every customer of ours for the likelihood to come back next year. We know anyone who comes into our database, who their likelihood to buy, and maybe I sell a certain type of customer better than the sales rep next to me. So how do we refine our lead scoring model? We're integrating a lot more sources of data into our CRM and really understand each and every customer's behavior, social media, what they buy in the stadium, all sorts of stuff. And lastly, which Kenny's going to talk a lot about, I'm sure, but customer segmentation. How do we understand all of our different types of customers and how do we market to them better? So that's a little bit about what we do, but I'll throw it back to Dan here.
Great. Well, now we all know next year when we're watching the home run derby at the All-Star game why the fences are moved up, right? So
it was only 36 inches.
yeah, what's the total?
36 inches, so
Okay.
it really was a business decision.
So, you know, it's fascinating, right? We've spent so much time over the last couple of days talking about everything on the baseball side, you know, but, you know, sometimes when you look at a roster move, right, or a coach's decision, you know, in the roster management, et cetera, you know, there is an analytical reason behind it, right? And I think, you know, Ryan, and now as we transfer over to Kenny, you know, the business reason of how analytics are driving some of those changes behind some of the things that we might take for granted on the surface. So excellent presentation, Ryan. Thanks for sharing. So we'll turn it over to his NL West rival, Kenny Farrell, who oversees Vice President of Business Analytics. Again, I'd have to think that's a job that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago, correct?
6 months ago.
Didn't
maybe.
exist 6 months ago. So hot off the presses with his new business cards. Please welcome Kenny Farrell, Vice President of Business Analytics for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Thanks. Yeah, we do live in a kind of a new era of unprecedented access to data, and the amount of data that's out there and our ability to kind of collect that and store that and use that is why departments like ours kind of exist today, and new opportunities come into how we kind of try to figure out what to do with all that data. You know, there's just such an enormous amount of data, and it's just kind of, for us, it's a matter of like, where do you start and what questions do you want to answer? My background is in communication, not in math. So kind of my driving force when I'm looking at what we're trying to work on is sort of start with the question, so what? You know, so we have all this data, so what are we going to do with it, or how would we want to use it? And the kind of case study I want to walk you through is a market segmentation project that we did to kind of understand who our fan is a little better. What I learned is talking to different people in our organization, marketing, communications, social media, creative, game operations, I'd kind of just ask who are we marketing to and who are we trying to target? And I think most people kind of thought they knew who our target was, but they'd kind of sort of think like, well, Diamondback fans, right? And what we kind of wanted to do was dig into that and challenge that a little bit and figure out if that was actually the case. So the first thing we want to do is just kind of start from a hypothesis standard of, you know, does what we think exists exist? Are there differences in who our fans are and what their characteristics are that are significant into how we'd market? Because if everybody's pretty much the same with just a little bit of differences, we might be able to just put out one message through one channel and hit everybody with that same channel. So what we wanted to try to do with the goal is just see what was different. 2, find an easy way to kind of narrow all those data points down so that everybody across the entire organization could consume them and understand what we were talking about. 3 is then try to use that information to make better decisions, whether it be how to place our marketing dollars or which fans to target or which items to give away on which days. And then lastly, overall, that would just kind of overall improve our ability to be more effective and efficient with marketing and our ability to, you know, what the primary goal here is to draw more fans to our games and grow our revenues. So what I thought was interesting about this particular project and why I wanted to share it today is ultimately it came from multiple different data sources. So with all that data out there, the first challenge is how do we kind of even hold that information and then dig in to be able to use that information. So for this particular project, we started with survey data as one sort of set of analysis. Surveys we've been doing forever. We've been asking our fans what they think about the game experience, and really they were kind of just for a particular group. What do you think about the music that we play? What do you think about the food that we serve? But what we found is some different information in there that we could kind of dive into that we'll talk about. 2, we have all the single game information when people buy tickets. So we know how many games you're coming to, where you sit, how much you spend, how many tickets you buy. So there's a lot of information we thought we could use with that. 3rd, we do have quite a bit of demographic information, so we kind of know things like where you live and how many people have families and general information kind of about income levels and kind of painting a picture about who our fans are demographically. And then lastly, we wanted to take all that and bring it together and really put some hard statistical analysis in to figure out, again, whether there were vastly different groups of people that we should be segmenting out to. So we looked at a lot of different things. Ultimately, the most significant variables, the first one was fan avidity, and that came out of our survey data. So what we found was interesting, we kind of knew for a long time, but just when we put it through this different lens, we saw there were diehard Diamondback fans, there were kind of casual Diamondback fans, and then there were a lot of people coming to games that were just not fans. Not fans of the Diamondbacks, not fans of baseball, not fans of sports, not fans at all. And so we knew kind of initially that there was definitely implication out of that fact that was going to be coming into play with this. Presence of children in household, I think obviously kind of as baseball being the most family accessible sport, we know that we draw a lot of families, it's important for us, but we know that there's kind of the family, non-family piece. Income, for the most part, is something that we know that we're looking for people to buy tickets, so we're kind of looking at the different variation there as well. Age, we also realize that we're talking about baseball being a younger sport. Ultimately, we have a lot of older fans, kind of what's the distribution there in terms of what's significant. How far people live from Chase Field. If you are familiar with the area, Phoenix is a very spread out market. We're one of the largest area-wise markets in all of baseball. And a lot of our, what I'd kind of call middle-class families tend to live 10, 15 plus miles away from our ballpark. So how does that kind of impact our ability to draw fans and come to multiple games? And then lastly, number of years that they lived in Arizona. This kind of ties into a little bit of avidity, but we kind of look at, do people, when we talk about remembering our World Series victory or we're going to retire Randy Johnson's number, does that resonate with our fans? Phoenix is a very transient market. How many people were even here then or were a part of that or remember what we were doing? So we kind of brought that into the model as well. So those were the things that ended up being most significant out of a lot of things that we were doing. All right, so these next 2 slides I want to show you. When I started kind of rolling out what we were doing here, internally I included these next 2 slides. And for the most part, I got a lot of blank stares. And nobody thought this was interesting, and nobody knew what I was talking about. So you're my last hope, okay? Please just nod your head and act like you find this interesting. So we ran all these factors into a statistical analysis. Every one of those little green pieces up there represents an actual data point from all those significant things we talked about. And this was the result the first time we ran it through with different factors and different things to see what was significant and different. Remember, we're looking for things that are different. That, to me, looks like a big blob. And so we looked at that and said, there doesn't seem to be significant differences between the pieces that we're putting into this model and what we're trying to get out of it statistically, okay? So the next step was, this was, I think, our 4th try, and there you see sort of a little bit variation. Got a clicker here. Anyway, you can kind of see one segment here, kind of another in the middle, and a third at the bottom. So what this kind of represented to us in a statistical model was that there were real differences between the people within these 3 different clusters. So the result of the project ultimately is a very intuitive kind of look into what you'd expect our fans to look like. And what we roll out is, and don't worry about the detail here, but we rolled out kind of like 5 little cute names with 5 little cute logos that identify kind of different segments of our fans. And really, basically, you're talking about Diamondback fans with children, Diamondbacks fans without children, fans of other teams that love baseball but aren't necessarily Diamondback fans, and people that aren't fans. So there's kind of 4 different things that we really see there. The 5th is millennials, which is kind of the group we're trying to cater to as we kind of grow the game. Nothing too real earth-shattering about kind of what you'd expect in terms of fans and non-fans and families and non-families. But what's interesting about it is by running this through kind of our ground up and from scratch, we know it's based on reality, actual behavior, actual views, and it has the science behind it so that we can trust that when we're talking about how to market our fans, we know that these differences are significant. So for example, if we're trying to sell a David Peralta t-shirt at the end of 2014, you may or may not know in this room potentially who David Peralta is, who was our emerging left fielder last year. But when you're trying to sell that to, who are we trying to market that to? it's not going to be to people that are fans of the Dodgers or the Giants or the Cubs, or it's not going to be fans of people or people that come to our games that don't necessarily follow the team. It's going to be people that watch our games and follow the team. What I kind of call it is like the inside joke. Like they know about our players, they know everything about what we do, and to communicate to that group, we don't necessarily have to use TV marketing or radio marketing or billboards. We can talk about these things in our broadcast, on our website, where they tell us that they check our information on a regular basis. So it potentially has this ability to make our ability to communicate much more efficient. We can communicate one message to this group via mass media channels and separately talk to this group that we know is watching our games and is going to be kind of attracted to things in a different way. So this allows us to kind of take, which really could be like 100 segments, but we see everything kind of on a bell curve. These are kind of the big chunks of groups that we have out there, and say, let's talk about how we want to roll out promotional ideas or what we're going to do to draw fans. So one example of how this was used was over the last couple years, we had a few different bobblehead giveaways. This is 2013, and the big line you see here in the middle is the Paul Goldschmidt bobblehead in terms of the number of single game tickets we sold for that game. And the small line over here is Miguel Montero, who at the time was probably our second most popular player on our team, and you would expect a better result because we're putting these marketing offers out there to try to draw fans that would be interested in that. And so we had, thought, well, maybe just, Goldie was that much more popular than Montero, or, maybe it was because we weren't playing well at the end of the year, although that year we were pretty much in the wild card race into September. So the next year, we decided to move Goldschmidt over to September. And you can see that the results kind of came out the same. So we realized at this point there had to be something with the fact that we weren't playing well at that time of the year and what the implication was. So the audience for a player bobblehead is going to be our avid fans, people that know our team, like our team, and want to get a giveaway of Paul Goldschmidt and Miguel Montero. So we kind of further dug in and looked at something like TV ratings here. On the top we have 2013, with the kind of middle being an average TV rating and then our winning record. So we were slightly above 500 for most of that season. And you can see that over here we had a big drop-off going into September of our TV ratings, so that impacted our ability to inform people about the Miguel Montero bobblehead. In 2014, our season didn't go so well. We started way down here and kind of like hovered all the way under, and what happened is even though we had actually better TV ratings for a lot of the part of the season through April, May, June, and through June, by the time we got to the end of July, for all of August and September, we saw a massive drop-off. So if the segment we're trying to market to is Diamondback fans, and the easiest way we can communicate to them is through our broadcast and while they're paying attention to us, the implication is if we want to maximize ticket sales and revenue, we need to move those things to a more secure time of the year. When things go well, September will be fine on its own. But when things don't go well, there isn't going to be much we can do to make people watch our games when we're losing 98 in the season, which we hope doesn't happen again. A lot. We really hope it doesn't happen again. So what we see here is this is some snippets of our promotional schedule and our big giveaways. All of our bobbleheads are ending by July 25th, and our kind of biggest last promoted game is August 8th. Doesn't mean we won't try to sell tickets or draw fans in late August and September, but what it tells us is that if we want to spend our dollars most efficiently to make the most amount of fans show up to those games, we need to put those in a more protected location. So ultimately, we have a model that we think is kind of gaining traction with the organization. The idea isn't to necessarily narrow down exactly what's going to work every time, but to help us think about those decisions on who our fans are, how they're different, and understand that the data we have will kind of help us determine where we can be most efficient with our marketing. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, so now we know the answers of how bobbleheads are created, right? I want to show you some quick math that I just did, right? The last slide here that Kenny had. So they have 10, am I getting this right? 10 bobblehead nights this year?
We have 5.
5?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 for this year. Simple math, for the future GMs in the room. When you think about revenue that's being generated and potentially I'm just going to use simple math, a 15,000 ticket swing, on a bobblehead night. Last year, the average ticket price for a Major League Baseball game, $27. Each of those nights, that would be about $400,000 in incremental revenue. Multiply that by 5 games, right? That's a $2 million swing to potentially what the other side of the hallway could do. That's one problem that's being solved. So you think about these new positions and, just in 6 months, right? I mean, you should get a raise. We should let Derek know, already. But
I got one.
Okay, well done. But in all seriousness, it all starts with solving a problem, right? And something as simple as how a bobblehead is selected, and then how do you connect the dots from revenue, just using that as a quick math estimate, it shows how teams can really, make a difference to their bottom line. Ryan mentioned in the last part of this session, I wanted to give you a lens into some other teams, outside of baseball. It all starts, and I think we'll talk about this in the Q&A. What's the business problem we're trying to solve, right? For me, with our company in Chicago, and we've got an office in Dallas, a lot of our clients are the really chief marketing officers of teams at major league, minor league and college teams. And what we're continually asked is, how can we find that extra 20% in revenue? That's the problem that we have. Sometimes it's ticket sales, sometimes it's sponsorship, sometimes it's in other areas of their business. But that's really the core of what we do, really critical thinkers, and then kind of connect that innovation to revenue. And 2012, in January, I actually had the great experience. I went to the Consumer Electronics Show. One of our clients at the time was AT&T, and was there with the head of global sponsorships for AT&T, and I was fascinated with how they used data to market their products. Really kind of were able to split and kind of condense who's an existing AT&T customer, how do we upsell them, who is not an AT&T customer, how do we acquire them, and kind of the early days of segmented marketing. So just like Ryan at the Padres is trying to ask the question of what's the business problem we're trying to solve, I came out of that experience and went to a lot of our clients that said, give us a business problem that you're trying to solve, and let me go back to AT&T and some of the tech companies that I met and ask the question of, if I had access to all this technology and I'm a team owner and I want to make money, what would I use to really kind of connect the dots? And I'm going to give you 3 case studies, and that'll lead into the discussion. One is from the University of South Carolina college football program and how they changed the way that they sell their season tickets. Second one is with the Cleveland Browns in how they find new sponsors and ultimately some of the inventory that they ultimately sell to them. And the last one, near and dear to my heart from the world of minor league baseball, the Corpus Christi Hooks from Texas League. Ryan actually mentioned it as well, the volatility of season tickets, the importance of continually selling individual game tickets. How do they use data to be able to do it? So this is really kind of the core, if you're looking to go on the business side or to understand it, right? Ticket sales, marketing, and sponsorship. So here's the challenge, right? So University of South Carolina, 3 years of declining season ticket memberships. We've seen this happen all on the baseball side. So how do they drive awareness and sales heading into the 2012 season? I'm going to show you how this strategy has evolved over time. The first thing that we did, is as both you guys outlined, the data really tells the story, right? What we were able to do is really study 2 segments of their fan base. The first was older alumni. I would be considered older alum, which is scary, as 35 and older. It shows you the importance of really attracting millennials. That's 50% of their engagement. Young alumni, kind of that 5 years out of graduation. How do they do it? 0 ticket sales from that group, right? So you talk about a blue ocean opportunity to really market to them. 100% is really marketed and actually transacted with that group. So what does that mean? There's interest, desire. I won't get into a lot of the deeper variables of it, but pricing's off, the messaging, how do you interact with them? And you segmented the strategy, and Ryan touched upon this, and I think it all goes down to segmentation and a lot of things that you can do utilizing big data, but marrying the segmentation with the creativity of the message. If you can look on the slides, there's 2 types of creative. There's young alumni and then older alumni. The younger alumni, it focused on the tradition of the message. And the Diamondbacks are doing the same thing with their 5 fan bases, right? But how you deliver the message and how you do that one-on-one from an interaction standpoint is important. So if you look at the copy for the younger alumni, it's all tailored creative with tradition, team performance, et cetera. But then if you look here at the second fan segment, the creative that's served, this is actually a young girl kind of on her dad's shoulders, and it says, your kids won't tell their kids about watching the game at home. You're encouraging them to get off the couch and actually go. And then how those ads are served as well. A mom is going to see that ad on her Facebook page in a different way than that 22 to 28-year-old is going to see that different ad for the creative. So not only the extra layer of categorizing who the fans are and where the opportunities and kind of the outliers are, but actually how you tell that story to them becomes really important. And actually, the result of South Carolina, I really want you to think about this. This was 2 seasons ago. Without the use of a human being off of this data strategy, they sold $922,000 worth of season tickets for really kind of a mid-tier SEC school, right? More of a challenger brand. And they did it just like I think the Diamondbacks are on that path to an incremental $2 million in revenue off of the bobbleheads, just as an estimate. It was just driven on identifying the problem that young alumni do not have the right messaging for them. And if you reach them through the proper digital channels, that's one way of solving that problem. Here's the other 3 that I'm going to talk about, the Corpus Christi Hooks and the Cleveland Browns, and the Comcast example as well. The Corpus Christi Hooks, this is fascinating, right? You probably hear a lot of teams talk about how many Facebook followers they have, how many likes they have, and kind of what does that actually mean. But how do you actually connect that to revenue? We actually studied the data of this Texas League team of actually how they sell tickets. And we started to learn that Facebook, within a 48-hour period, is the #1 driver for them to sell individual game tickets. So they started serving, again, that same targeted media off of that, and they started acquiring customers at a pretty phenomenal rate of a 4,400 ROI. And when you start to think about that segmentation, and we can get longer into this on the discussion, but this is a Texas League team, right? This is a team that most of their fans are trying to decide, should I go to the movies or out to dinner that night versus a ball game, and how you can kind of find these new fans and really serve them with media very economically is fantastic. My last example, and I'll end with this so we can have time for discussion. I think this is a fascinating kind of aha moment, I think, in my career that we've really repeated over and over again with teams in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. The use of data, and how you get fans that come to your website. Probably everybody here is a member of some level of grocery store rewards program. You didn't read the waiver. You didn't read the privacy, your credit card, all of these things, all of these different accounts. And what we realized was AT&T has access to all of this information. There's different points of data that they can pull from your web behavior. It's a real honest assessment. Your website behavior probably knows you better than you know yourself, right? If I'm asked a question of, what newspapers do I read, I'm probably not going to say TMZ or the New York Post, right? But those are some guilty pleasures that we all have, right? And that kind of has some of your tendencies and your behavior. Purchasing behavior, the products and services you buy on a daily basis. So the Browns, they had maximized some of their in-stadium inventory that they had. They're in a publicly owned facility. Heading into the draft last year, they were, kind of a challenger brand as far as the NFL is concerned. So we placed pixels on their website the night of the draft. And what we were able to do is we had all these different data points that are tied to your credit card purchases, your Instagram behavior. You can link into Gmail. Anytime you've mentioned the Browns in your Gmail, all these things that you can start to pull, and we would create these fan profiles. Now, what we didn't anticipate was that they would draft Johnny Manziel. So kind of an outlier, unpredictable, moment in their franchise's history where site traffic went through the roof. So to Kenny's slides, we not only had the diehard Browns fans in that 24-hour period that came, we also had entertainment seekers and kind of the casual fan that were driven. The Browns actually had the highest traffic. So that Thursday night of the draft last year, their traffic went through the roof. We had all this data to analyze. That Friday morning, our analysts in our Dallas office, drinking a lot of Mountain Dew and Red Bulls, just kind of going crazy, right? Analyzing all this data, identified this outlier category of purchase behavior. What's the business problem we're trying to solve? New sponsorship revenue, new sponsors to sell to, and incremental revenue for the franchise. You can see here, 2/3 of Browns fans in that 24-hour period owned a dog. We were able to actually prove mathematically, the amount of Purina dog food that those fans base had bought in a 30-day period. We took that data to the Browns sponsorship department. That Monday, they cold called Purina in St. Louis. That Thursday, they presented that data and closed a $500,000 sponsorship in a category that didn't exist for them, et cetera. You see how that can kind of work, of connecting big data to sponsorship revenue. This is the one that we just got so jazzed about. The second example from the Browns was actually in their auto category. Every Major League Baseball team, every minor league baseball team, every team, frankly, I think I've ever worked with, has an auto sponsor. But at the end of the day, it's going to be measured by how many cars did you sell through the sponsorship. With this same philosophy, we were able to break down by linking into their actual search behavior of how many people had searched to buy an auto car in the last 6 months. What type of car had they searched for? What were their viewing habits, et cetera? So the Browns were able to go to Kia and actually say, not only do we have this large volume of people, it's great that we've got 20 million likes or whatever the example is, we have 16,000 people that are fans of yours that are going to buy a car in the next 6 months. Now use that same strategy of using targeted media that South Carolina used, of serving a mom with a Browns ad, for a particular type of Kia, for a test drive and get 4 free tickets to the game because the value proposition is greater. And where it gets really interesting, and I'll end with this example. I'm sure many of us have been on Zappos or, a website, you look at a pair of Nikes and you go to another website, right? And it kind of follows you. It's kind of weird, right? And actually I was guilty of it for any of the single guys in the room. When I was looking for an engagement ring for my wife, I made the mistake of, looking online at a couple examples, and then all of a sudden all these engagement rings are popping up. So use someone else's computer, fellows, because I think my wife-to-be was like, oh, interesting, you should look at this page. As an example, right? But early in my career, I did a lot of work in Major League Baseball with non-traditional sponsorship inventory. The first one that I worked on was with the Chicago White Sox, where we actually changed the game times from 7:05 to 7:11, and we sold that as a sponsorship to 7-Eleven. So you get kind of my DNA of non-traditional inventory, right? We started thinking about that same process with Zappos and what these companies do, and they follow you. Zappos is all they're doing is they're creating a network of potential customers, and they know what you're interested in, right? So we worked with the Browns to actually turn that into sponsorship inventory. So now the Browns have their own digital network, which they can serve media on year-round. And in the case of like an auto dealer, Kia needs to sell cars when the Browns aren't playing, when the season dips, as an example, right? So now the Browns can have access to their sponsors to tap into their network, and they're selling this on a year-round basis. As a multiple for the Browns, they would expect about a 20% revenue growth from existing sponsors by implementing this. And we're seeing this in the NBA, NFL, and other clients. And I think that at the core, going back to what these guys talked about in the beginning, right? What's the business problem to solve? How can data, how can analytics, all of these resources that you have do it? And you think about it, whether it's a bobblehead or in the case of the Browns, right? NFL is different because they have salary cap, right? But what an exciting time to be one of these two guys, right? And the ability to really change and increase the team's payroll and its business side. So with that, I'm gonna turn my hat on to my moderator. I'll go back to my slide hold for that. And I'll start with an easy question, I think, for you guys. I think there's a lot of people in this room that would want to be in your chair, right? It's an exciting time. Give me some insights into some advice that maybe you have for some of the students in the room of actually, sitting in your chair and having your job right now.
That's a good question. I get asked this a lot. People, reach out and ask my advice on working in sports, which is great. I always say that I got lucky. I, fell into the right place. I think the most important thing is narrow down what you want to do. Everyone in this room wants to work in baseball, and there's a lot of people who want to work in baseball. But what is it exactly that you want to do? Do you want to work in scouting? Do you want to have the job like me and Kenny have? Do you want to work in marketing, sponsorship, whatever it is? Narrow that down, and then just start meeting people. Meeting people across the industry. It's a really small industry. Meet people, do projects, never turn down opportunities. And, I think it's one of the industries where it's kind of serendipitous. You put yourself in the right place at the right time and be top of mind for somebody who's looking to hire somebody smart. And that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, I would say lucky is definitely part of the equation, and timing and luck is part of it. My story is unique and not one that I recommend, which is I started with the Diamondbacks right out of college 18 years ago and somehow kind of turned a career selling tickets into vice president of business analytics. It's a tough road. I think what people need to recognize about sports franchises is that we are high profile, but we're small businesses. So, Ryan and I think our teams are similar. We're about 4 of us on our analytics teams on the business side. I think our marketing department is, 4 or 5 full-time people. And then, it's just tough to break into. So I think managing expectations, kind of knowing what you want to try to do with it. I've had a lot of people come in, kind of work for me. You start to talk about like coming into like a ticket sales type role and say like, where do you want your career to go? And they say, I want to be a general manager. And you're like, well, it's just not. That's not the way to go. So I think kind of knowing where you want to go, trying to start and understand that it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of luck, and then just kind of managing expectations so that if you want to do it, go for it, but recognize that, opportunity is sometimes limited because we're not large corporate organizations, and it's tough to kind of find that career path sometimes.
Yeah, and even obviously within your departments now, these by and large are departments that didn't exist a few years ago. Talk to me about the structure of, a business analytics department, what a typical day might be like too of, you guys gave a great lens into some of the problems that you solve, but is marketing coming down to you guys with problems? Are you constantly crunching data? What's some typical days or weeks like for the two of you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I actually interned with the Padres when I was in business school. So I worked as an intern in the department that I now oversee. So it's kind of the type of thing that you have to, get your foot in the door any way you can. What I do on a daily basis or on a weekly basis changes, and that's why I love my job. I couldn't do the same thing every day. It really depends on the year. One day I'm doing ticket pricing, the next I'm projecting what our ticket revenue will be, the next I'm looking at how to renovate our stadium, the next I'm looking at how to build a mobile application to engage with fans. The way that it's structured, I oversee our CRM manager and 2 analysts, and I oversee a couple other things as well. But from an analytics perspective, we kind of sit in the middle, like the hub of the wheel, so to speak, in the middle of all of the business side, finance, marketing, ticket sales, sponsorship, ballpark operations, that type of thing. And they all kind of come to me with issues, or we proactively go out to them with things that we think they could potentially use data to make smarter business decisions on.
Yeah, we're structured in a lot in the same way that Ryan is. For us, it was really transforming our department, which I oversaw at the time, from a CRM department, which is a database management function, managing our customer database, and the function of just kind of what we do in terms of ticket sales and outbound ticket sales and managing leads, and growing that into something that turned into our analytics department. So I think what ultimately happened is there's project that needed to be worked on, and taking the lead and saying I can lead that, and ultimately hire and add the extra people that needed to come in to be able to manage that. So it started with me and one CRM person. Ultimately we added one, we added another, and so our key projects are probably half of the time set on just certain function things we need to manage. We need to manage our databases. We need to manage ticket pricing. We need to manage the things that kind of happen day in, day out. And then we also have the ability and the autonomy to be able to kind of say, what are the things we want to work on? And so, things like marketing analytics or acquisition costs or lifetime customer values, market segmentation, the things we decide that we think we can have impact with, we can kind of choose to take on as projects and then just figure out how to manage that kind of resources kind of properly.
Yeah, no, great insights. I actually was handed a piece of paper of a question from the back, and certainly, guys, in the 10 or so minutes we have left, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a question as well. I'll read this verbatim, but in many businesses, the salespeople are kind of quote unquote the star, right? The highest paid, but on commission. Is there a scenario in the future where, I like this, we're getting old school
Technology for you right
exactly, there. Exactly. Is there a scenario in the future where ticket sales employees are paid significant salaries but on commission?
I think that exists right now. I mean, most of our ticket sales employees are incentivized heavily on commission or bonus structures. So we put together commission structures that, they have a certain goal they're supposed to hit, and when they hit it, then they start, making money. They get paid on every season ticket sale and group sale that they have. So depending on the person, I mean, their large portion of their compensation is already commission and bonus based.
And I think what's unique about Ryan and I's roles is, we have people employed to sell, luxury suite inventory or season tickets or group tickets, and everybody can kind of cross over within that, but they're incentivized and commissioned to sell those tickets. What our job is, kind of Ryan talked about, balancing out where should we be selling tickets, when should we be selling group tickets. So we have to look at it kind of from a holistic standpoint and make sure we're doing, what a sales rep's designed to do is do what's in the best interest for themselves, which ultimately helps everybody. But what our job is to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest for the big picture and kind of placing everything where it needs to be.
Yeah, our sales reps oftentimes don't like me because I do things that take away their inventory or whatever it might be, but it's for the betterment of the organization. So you got to keep the big picture.
Yeah. Question from this gentleman.
I have a question for you, Kenny. Now that we know why you traded Migala Montero to the Cubs, you've got a promotion on May 23rd, Cubs Saturday. My family's going to be there that day. I want to know if we're going to get any of the leftover Montero bobblehead.
Not that day, for sure. But it is an interesting, we have games, we have a pretty good schedule this year. We have kind of a weekend Cubs series in May, which, should be good. And that fan base has kind of not been activated for the last 5 years. And I think that fan base is kind of excited about coming back out that are out here. So, that's actually one of the balances, is looking kind of like where do we need kind of help on kind of days that maybe are going to do well, and then where do we want to kind of add something on top. But then we wouldn't want to put something, say, on a Cubs Saturday that is very Diamondback specific, because ultimately we know we're going to be giving that giveaway to a bunch of Cubs fans, and that's not really serving our kind of fan base the best. So, yeah, I'll get you a Miggy bobblehead if you'd like. Just see me afterwards.
Yeah. Other Vince?
I've seen some work being done at the team level where they've tried to adjust revenue targets for the impact of playing performance, so as to bonus compensate sales and marketing executives for just the portion of the revenue growth that they're responsible for. So if the team goes from here 1 year to there next year, and season ticket sales fall by 2% or stay flat, it might be heroic performance. On the converse, if the team makes the playoffs coming off of an 80-win season the year before, the sales and marketing team may not, in fact, aren't responsible for all of that revenue growth. Have you gotten into that area at all yet? Done any work in that area?
I'm doing it as we speak right now. I think with the offseason we've had with the player acquisitions and the All-Star Game announcement, I mean, we forecast our revenue back in October before any of this happened. And we constantly do reforecasts and adjustments, probably once a month. We're looking at, where are we pacing, where are our expectations, especially in those kind of controllable revenue lines, the season ticket sales, group sales, sponsorship, that type of stuff. So we're constantly adjusting, and with adjustments comes adjustment with goals and expectations for all the way on down, executives to sales reps. And once they adjust their goals, then it try to smooth the compensation, I think is what you're getting at.
I think there's a question.
Can you discuss your club's view of maximizing revenue versus filling up the park?
Yeah, for us, it's clearly both. We have a big park in Phoenix. If you haven't been to Chase Field, it's one of the bigger parks. We were built right after Coors Field was opened, and I think the model at that point was still building closer to 50,000, and then we were the last park. Everybody else was nicely at like 42, 39, 38. So we have a big capacity, and we have a lot of seats to sell. We're also, we kind of tend to rank kind of in the 18 to 22 in Major League attendance. We'd love to get that back up. So selling tickets and putting people in our park is the number one most important thing. Doing that while kind of figuring out how to grow revenues is secondary for us, but we think we can basically find a way to do both. I don't necessarily think that they're mutually exclusive. So in other words, I don't think if we lowered all of our tickets to $5, we would suddenly be at 5 million tickets. I think that at some point we need to understand that people are going to want to consume baseball games, and there's an expectation that there's going to be a ticket price to pay, and we just need to make sure that those are all set fair and affordable so that we can draw the most amount of people while still trying to figure out how to maximize the revenue along the way.
Yeah, similar viewpoints. Our stadium's a little bit smaller, but it's still too big. I think we can fit 44 in ours. So I think what we try to look at is like the economics terms, like what's the price elasticity. So, if somebody's going to come to a game, what are they going to be willing to pay for that ticket? And, we're going to understand that there are going to be some games where we're going to have 17, 18,000 people there. So how do we maximize the games that are going to be sellouts and then, be creative with pricing and promotions and group sales to drive the games that would be 17 to 20,000 otherwise. So it's a little bit of both, but you look at which games and try to figure out where you're going to pull which levers.
And beyond that, the nice thing with baseball is that, we have a lot of options. So even if tickets are $40, $60, $80, we're typically going to have some sort of seat for $15, $18. So there's kind of an affordability that's always built into it so that if somebody is, concerned about the economics of coming to a game, we can accommodate that and make sure that families are still able to make it.
How do those decisions affect your decisions with respect to season ticket holders? So your game-by-game decisions versus treating your season ticket holders in a fair...
Go ahead.
We always season ticket holders are number one. They're always going to get best pricing for best inventory, best games. So we kind of treat them as one customer base, but we're very careful about what we do from a pricing standpoint. We do so much from an event standpoint to give our season ticket holders value over above. We have a 12-month-a-year membership program. We have experiences that only season ticket holders that can get. They get discounts at concessions, and there's a lot of stuff that we do to make season ticket members kind of what they are to us, which is our most important customers. A lot of the decisions that I talked about from a pricing perspective are trying to balance that with our Giants fan that comes to our Giants Padres game. I don't really care how much he pays for a ticket, so I'm going to make him pay a lot. So there's a balance to be had for sure, but our season ticket members are always going to be treated as number one for us, and you try to figure out when and where it makes sense to pull the levers to take advantage and drive revenue.
There's been a lot of discussion of whether season tickets are eventually going to kind of die out and people won't buy season tickets. I mean, to this point, it's still an enormous part of our fan base, an enormous part of our revenues, and we put a ton of expense and investment into kind of making sure that those people are treated the best way and that those fans are coming back year after year. It's extremely, extremely important. So that's kind of always by far the number one goal on the list.
Here in the front.
Yeah, that's the holy grail. So we just launched our mobile. MLB Advanced Media has always had the At the Ballpark app. We did a lot of work with it last year to make it specific to engaging with customers, mobile ticketing, mobile e-cash, cashless payments, earning rewards through your app, and so on and so forth. I think once we have a lot of adoption of that, that's certainly step two for that. Anything in a digital mobile world is run at Major League Baseball Advanced Media, so they usually dictate the strategy, and we're kind of really trying to push certain things that are important to us, but ultimately they're the decision maker on a lot of that.
I think the commissioner's pitch clock is in the final 30 seconds here. I gotta get my hold both on taking us to the ninth inning, but also Ryan's actually got a flight here this afternoon that he's got to run to. So is there one more question? Nope, just scratching. I like it. One last question for the guys, and then we'll let Ryan head off, to the airport. But it's amazing to think, right? 6 months ago, you were in a different position, Kenny. 2 years ago, you were here as an attendee, right? How quickly this side of the business and problem solving using data and analytics is changing. Let's fast forward to, we're at the Analytics Conference 5 years from now, 2019 or 2020. What's your department going to look like, and what's the future for positions on this side of the business?
I think there's a lot of unknown there, just because I think we do still have to kind of figure out what problems we're trying to solve. But ultimately, the amount of data is going to continue to increase, and our ability to access that data is going to be much easier. And that's kind of the key barrier, I think, at some level, is access to quick and easy information, and then how that can help us make decisions faster. So we certainly have an expectation. We've added an employee each of the last couple of years, and we're, I think, nearing the point where we think we need to kind of grow that again. So I wouldn't be surprised if our department was double its size in 5 years than it is today.
Yeah, the amount of data that we're getting is growing exponentially. I think when I first started, this was just a purely ticketing function, because that's where the data lived. You had data from your tickets and customers, but you didn't really have anything else. You didn't have concessions data. You didn't have market-specific stuff like Kenny was talking about earlier. You didn't have mobile and digital activity. So as the data grows, so does the opportunity, and so does the amount of work to be done. So I think a lot of customer-specific information is going to be coming to us in the next few years. So I see a lot of opportunity there, but it's really becoming something that's a function across the entire business, and not just in the ticketing world, which is where it really started.
Yeah. Well, I don't need any data to know that this was a great panel. So let's give these guys a round of applause.